If you think Easter is just about colorful eggs and playful bunnies, then you're standing on the shore, barely dipping your toes into an ocean of meaning that runs far deeper than any holiday festivity. Easter Sunday is not a mere calendar event, it is the seismic pivot of history. The moment where the impossible ripped through time. A resurrection that didn't just change a life but shattered the chains of death itself, rewriting the destiny of every soul. Imagine a story so vast, so utterly transformative, that it humbles the greatest epics ever told. This is that story. It's a cosmic triumph, a divine crescendo that echoes through eternity, declaring victory over the final enemy, death. Most people never realize the weight carried by this single day. Easter is the climax of a redemptive saga scripted long before human memory. Foretold in ancient prophecies like a whisper in the dark that promised light would come. It is the heartbeat of hope pulsing relentlessly beneath centuries of doubt and despair. To truly grasp Easter's magnitude, you must look past the surface trappings and confront the raw power of resurrection itself, the shattering of tombs and the rise of a new covenant with life eternal. I don't say this lightly. This event was never meant to be a simple remembrance. It was, and remains, the unveiling of an unstoppable force that overturned the shadow of death's dominion. Challenging every fear that grips humanity, Easter beckons us into a mystery where death's silence is broken by an earth-shaking proclamation. Life conquers all. It's a story of love so fierce it dared to step into death's territory and emerge victorious. Not just for one, but for all who dare to believe. Picture the scene. A stone rolled away. A tomb found empty, not because the body vanished but because death itself was defeated. That empty tomb is not just a historical fact. It's the loudest possible statement that nothing, not pain, not suffering, not the darkest night, can hold the light captive forever. And here's where it gets personal. This victory isn't a distant myth. It's an invitation extended to each of us, a call to rise beyond fear, beyond despair, beyond the limits imposed by a broken world. To embrace Easter is to step into new life, a life marked by hope reborn and faith unleashed. I've seen too many lives trapped under the heavy weight of hopelessness. Yet, when we confront the truth of the resurrection, everything shifts. It's like a wildfire igniting inside the soul, burning away the old and lighting a path toward freedom. Easter reminds us that death is not the final chapter, it's a doorway, flung wide open by love's power. This is the moment where history itself takes a sharp turn, the moment humanity's broken story finds its healing. So, don't let the surface fool you. Easter is more than tradition, more than celebration. It's the heartbeat of an eternal victory that still calls out today, challenging us to believe, to hope, and to rise. The empty tomb is not just an ancient relic, it's a living promise. One that shouts louder than any doubt or fear. When you understand Easter's true meaning, you see that it changed everything, not just once in history, but every day, for every person who dares to step out of the darkness and into the light. Long before the pages of history were written, before empires rose and fell, before time even began its steady march, a divine plan was already in motion, an eternal script woven into the very fabric of existence. This was no ordinary tale, it was the blueprint of redemption, whispered through the voices of prophets whose words echoed across centuries with piercing clarity. They spoke not of myth or fantasy, but of a suffering servant destined to bear the weight of humanity's sins. A redeemer who would shatter the chains of despair and usher in a hope that would never fade. The prophecies in the Psalms and the piercing visions of Isaiah were not just ancient poetry. They were promises carved into the bedrock of faith, a promise that the Holy One, though wounded and cast aside, would never see decay but rise triumphant over the final enemy, death itself. This plan was no mere afterthought or desperate hope clinging to uncertainty. It was a cosmic design, a divine orchestration that stretched beyond human comprehension. The resurrection was not an accident or a lucky escape, it was a destined event, etched into the very blueprint of creation. a calculated victory over the forces that sought to claim humanity's soul. The more I ponder this, the more I am struck by the sheer audacity of it all, how an eternal God chose to enter the chaos of time and death, not with overwhelming force, but through the vulnerability of suffering and sacrifice. The plan was perfect in its paradox, power in weakness, triumph in apparent defeat. It is staggering to realize that every prophecy, every whispered promise, was not just a story to inspire, but a roadmap leading to this climactic moment of resurrection. This was a battle fought on invisible plains, a war for the very essence of life itself, waged long before swords were drawn or empires built. The anticipation carried by the prophets was palpable, their words dripping with certainty that a Redeemer would come, not just to suffer, but to conquer death, reversing the trajectory of despair that had gripped the world since the fall. I often reflect on how this eternal plan redefines everything we think about fate and freedom. Here is a God who is not distant or detached, but intimately involved in the brokenness of the world, crafting a rescue mission so profound that it shatters the boundaries between mortal frailty and divine power. The resurrection is not just a miraculous event, it is the ultimate proof that no darkness is too deep, no tomb too sealed to hold back the force of life unleashed by love. It rewrites the human story from one of inevitable decay to one bursting with hope, renewal, and unshakable victory. The tension in this story is palpable. The suffering servant who appears defeated, the silence of the tomb, the weight of despair pressing down like a storm, but it is in that very silence and suffering that the eternal plan reaches its crescendo. The resurrection is the thunderclap that shatters the night, the earth trembling beneath the feet of death's conqueror. And here lies the beauty and the drama. What seemed like an end was only the beginning. What seemed like a final breath was a victorious roar. The eternal plan, so long foretold, explodes into history with a force that demands attention, inviting each of us to witness and become part of a story far greater than ourselves. In embracing this, I find a personal reckoning, an urgent call to look beyond the surface and grasp the cosmic magnitude at play. This isn't just history, it's the eternal heartbeat of hope beating in our very lives. It's the promise that even in our darkest moments, when all seems lost, the resurrection is poised to rewrite our story. The plan foretold so long ago is alive, unstoppable, and forever transforming the world, and every soul brave enough to believe in its power. The hill called Golgotha outside Jerusalem became the stage for the darkest hour in history. A moment so heavy with agony and betrayal that the weight of it presses on every soul who dares to look. Jesus of Nazareth stood condemned, not by justice, but by fear and cruelty. His hands and feet, pierced by nails, were not just wounds inflicted by Roman soldiers. They were the profound signatures of a love so immense it swallowed unimaginable pain to bear the burden of humanity's sins. To witness this scene is to confront the raw edge of sacrifice, where divine mercy and human brutality collide in a silent storm of agony. The sky itself seemed to mourn, as darkness swallowed the noon sun, turning day into night. This wasn't natural, it was a cosmic shadow cast over creation, a reflection of the spiritual battle unfolding beyond human eyes. The earth trembled as if nature itself rebelled against what was happening, a holy violence shaking the foundations of the world. The tearing of the temple veil, that sacred curtain separating God's presence from man, ripped open with a sudden force, signaling that the ancient barriers were dissolving. God was breaking into human suffering, collapsing the walls that kept heaven and earth apart. Yet for those watching, hope was buried beneath despair. His followers, hearts shattered and minds numb, stood trembling at what appeared to be a devastating end. The Messiah, their promised Savior, hung lifeless, the very embodiment of death's triumph. I can't help but feel the crushing weight of that moment. The cross is not just a symbol, it is the darkest crucible of love tested in fire. It is a place where silence screamed, where the divine became the suffering servant in its rawest form. The paradox here is unbearable. The king crowned with thorns, the Son of God shamed and broken, all by the hands of those he came to save. It is the ultimate paradox that this moment, heavy with death and loss, contains the seed of resurrection. The cross challenges us to face the brutal reality of pain and injustice, and yet invites us to believe in a love so radical it chooses suffering over abandonment. In reflecting on this, I'm drawn to the overwhelming humanity of Jesus' suffering. It was not distant or detached, it was visceral, tangible, and terrifying. This was a man stripped of dignity, bearing the cumulative weight of every sin ever committed. Yet, even in his darkest hour, there was a profound surrender, not resignation, but a fierce will to fulfill the eternal plan. The silence of heaven felt deafening, but it was the calm before the storm, the pause before the ultimate victory. This moment demands that we reckon with the cost of redemption, not as a distant idea, but as a brutal reality etched in flesh and blood. The cross, then, is more than history, it is a mirror. It forces us to confront our own darkness, our betrayals, our moments of despair. It asks whether we can trust a love willing to endure the unendurable. For me, the power of the cross lies in this tension between death and hope, agony and love, despair and promise. It is a call to embrace the mystery that in the darkest night, the first light is already breaking, and from death's shadow, life will burst forth. The cross is the turning point where human hopelessness meets divine hope, a raw, shattering, beautiful moment that still reverberates in every heart willing to listen. The borrowed tomb stood cold and silent, its heavy stone sealing away not just a body, but the hopes and dreams of countless hearts shattered in despair. Soldiers stood guard, their presence meant to prevent any disturbance, to imprison death's final claim. For the disciples, that silence was unbearable, a crushing void where hope seemed to have died alongside the man they had followed, believed in, loved. The weight of grief was suffocating, a silence so thick it drowned out every whisper of faith. The very air seemed heavy with defeat, as if the world itself had paused in mourning. They had witnessed a promise of redemption, only to find it buried in darkness and doubt. The silence of the tomb was the echo of their broken dreams. Yet, beneath that suffocating quiet, something extraordinary was brewing, an unseen power gathering like a storm on the horizon, ready to unleash a force that no guard, no stone, no death could contain. This silence was not the end. It was the sacred stillness before the eruption of life itself. The divine plan, so meticulously woven through time, was reaching its pivotal crescendo. I find it profoundly humbling that what appears as finality, the sealed tomb, the soldier's watchful eyes, is in reality the threshold of the impossible. This pause, this seeming void, holds within it the electric anticipation of resurrection. It is as if creation itself holds its breath, waiting for the moment when death's grip will be shattered forever. The sacred silence is a powerful reminder that darkness often precedes the brightest light. The tomb's stillness is not emptiness, it is pregnant with promise. It challenges our human tendency to despair when faced with endings, teaching us that beneath every silence lies the potential for rebirth. In this quiet, the divine whispers a secret too profound for words, a truth that defies the limits of human understanding. This moment invites us to trust beyond what we see, to hold on to faith when all evidence points to loss. It is a call to believe that the story is far from over, that from this stillness will explode a victory so monumental it rewrites the very fabric of existence. I have wrestled with the heaviness of this silence, felt the raw ache of hopelessness it can bring. But then I remember that silence is not passive, it is pregnant with power. The tomb's quiet is the hush before a cosmic roar, the stillness before the dawn breaks with unstoppable force. This is where faith meets mystery, where the divine chooses to work not with fanfare, but with quiet certainty. The soldiers may watch, the stone may be sealed, but none can hold back the power that courses beneath, ready to shatter death's chains. This silence is a challenge to every one of us, a test of our willingness to believe in what cannot be seen, to trust in a love that conquers even the finality of death. It reminds us that sometimes, the greatest transformations happen in the quiet moments when the world thinks all is lost. The silence of the tomb is not a void, it is the breath before life's ultimate victory. It is the divine promise waiting to explode into glory, inviting us all to rise from despair into hope, from death into life. At the break of dawn on the third day, the world itself seemed to hold its breath as the earth trembled beneath a power beyond comprehension. The stone, massive and meant to seal a fate, was rolled away, not by human hands, but by the unstoppable force of heaven breaking into the realm of the dead. The tomb that once imprisoned hope was now an empty chamber, echoing with the promise of a new dawn. This was no ordinary morning. It was the rupture of time and death, the shattering of the final barrier that held humanity captive. As the women approached, their hearts heavy with grief and duty, they were met not by the silence of death, but by a radiant presence, a dazzling angel whose voice cut through despair with a declaration that would forever rewrite history. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Those words were not a whisper but a thunderclap that shattered every shadow of doubt. In that instant, the impossible became undeniable. The resurrection was no mere revival. It was the birth of eternal victory. The definitive defeat of death and sin. It was the first fruits of a new creation, a cosmic revolution exploding forth from the depths of the grave. This moment changed everything. It overturned the old story of loss and despair, replacing it with a narrative of hope and unyielding life. The resurrection is not just a miracle to be admired from afar. It is the foundation of faith, the proof that the darkest night cannot hold the light forever. I find myself awestruck by the sheer magnitude of this event. Here, in the silence of the early morning, the universe shifted on its axis. The resurrection tore open the veil of death and invited all who believe to step into a reality where life triumphs eternally. The women's encounter with the angel is a powerful reminder that the divine often reveals itself in unexpected moments. To the overlooked and the faithful, their fear, confusion, and eventual joy mirror the human experience of confronting the unimaginable. It is a scene filled with tension and release, where grief is transformed into ecstatic hope. Personally, this reminds me that even in our darkest hours, when all seems lost, the possibility of new beginnings waits just beyond the horizon. The resurrection morning invites us to trust in that promise with a faith fierce enough to move mountains. The empty tomb is more than a symbol. It is a declaration that death has been decisively defeated. That sin no longer holds the final word. It challenges every one of us to reconsider what we believe about life, death, and what lies beyond. This victory is not reserved for the distant past. It pulses with relevance here and now, calling us to rise above fear and embrace the transformative power of resurrection in our own lives. The stone rolled away signals not just freedom for Jesus but freedom for all who dare to believe. In embracing this truth, I feel a profound sense of hope and urgency. The resurrection is the ultimate game changer, a cosmic reset button that promises renewal, healing, and eternal life. It is a fierce invitation to live not bound by the shadows of death, but alive in the unstoppable light of resurrection. This morning was the dawn not just of a new day but of a new reality, one where the impossible breaks through, and life conquers all. Jesus chose not to make a grand entrance to crowds or kingdoms but sought the quiet corners of broken hearts, revealing himself in moments of intimate encounter. To Mary Magdalene, grief-stricken and searching in the early dawn, he spoke her name, a simple, tender call that shattered the fog of despair and rekindled a hope that seemed all but lost. That moment is profound. It teaches us that resurrection is not only cosmic or historic but deeply personal. It meets us exactly where we are, in our confusion, our fear, our loneliness, and calls us by name into new life. I find this tenderness of the risen Christ profoundly moving because it speaks directly to the human experience. Sometimes, all we need is to be seen, known, and called back from the abyss. On the road to Emmaus, The risen Jesus walked beside two disciples who were engulfed by confusion and sorrow. He opened the scriptures to them, revealing a narrative of suffering, hope, and victory they had missed. It was in the breaking of bread, that simple act of sharing a meal, that their eyes were opened, and their hearts ignited with a fire of understanding. This encounter reminds me that resurrection truth is not always loud or spectacular, but often revealed in the quiet unfolding of understanding. In shared moments that awaken the soul, it challenges us to look beyond our limited perspectives and open ourselves to a deeper revelation that transforms grief into joy, ignorance into clarity. To the fearful followers locked away behind closed doors, Jesus appeared with scars that bore witness to his suffering and triumph. He offered peace that defied logic and fear, proving that death's grip was broken. This appearance was not just to prove he was alive, but to instill courage and mission, to turn trembling despair into bold proclamation. For me, this moment is the heartbeat of faith. The wounds that once symbolized defeat become the very proof of victory. It challenges the way we perceive weakness and strength, showing that true power lies in vulnerability and resurrection. Jesus does not hide his scars, he reveals them, inviting us to embrace our own brokenness as the pathway to healing and purpose. These personal encounters with the risen Christ do more than comfort, they transform. Despair dissolves into faith, confusion is replaced with proclamation, and isolated fear becomes communal courage. I believe this is the core of the resurrection's ongoing power. It is alive, active, and relational. It calls us not just to remember a historic event, but to engage in a living, breathing relationship with the risen Savior who meets us in our doubts, speaks to our fears, and ignites our souls with purpose. The intimacy of these encounters breaks the mold of what we might expect from divine revelation. It is not spectacle but presence, not grandiosity but tenderness. It insists that resurrection life is accessible, personal, and deeply transformative. I am struck by how these stories invite us to find Christ not in distant heavens but in the quiet, often messy spaces of our daily lives, walking beside us, speaking our names, opening our eyes, and healing our wounds. This is the resurrection that changes everything, not only history but our very hearts and lives. The resurrection was nothing less than a cosmic earthquake, a cataclysmic event that shook the very foundations of heaven and earth. It was the ultimate fulfillment of God's ancient promise, a declaration that sin and death, those relentless tyrants, would not hold the final say over creation. The forces of nature themselves seemed to rebel against death's reign. The grave relinquished its claim. The shadows of despair were pierced by an unyielding light, and the curse that had bound humanity since Eden was powerfully reversed. This was not a mere theological idea or symbolic gesture, it was a raw, seismic shift in the destiny of the universe. I am struck by how this event rewrites everything we think we know about life and death. The resurrection dismantles the finality of mortality and rewires the story of existence itself. Yet, as vast and awe-inspiring as this cosmic victory is, its impact is not distant or abstract, it is profoundly personal. Reaching into the core of every individual's struggle and brokenness, it offers a liberation that cannot be found in human achievement or fleeting success. It is freedom from the crushing weight of guilt that haunts the conscience and the healing of shame that erodes self-worth. For many, the resurrection's power lies in its ability to make grace tangible, to transform lives marred by failure into testimonies of hope. I have witnessed this transformation countless times, where the chains of past mistakes fall away, replaced by a courageous new identity rooted in unmerited favor. This grace-infused courage empowers a boldness to live fully, to embrace vulnerability without fear, and to move forward with a resilient spirit. The cosmic and the personal collide in this victory, creating a dynamic tension that shapes our understanding of faith and life. It is a reminder that the vast universe and the intimate human soul are not separate realms but interconnected realities impacted by the resurrection's force. The earth's shaking is mirrored in the trembling hearts of those who dare to believe that death is not the end. that new life is possible beyond every grave. This duality challenges me deeply. It forces a reckoning between the grandeur of God's power and the intimate mercy extended to each soul. In the face of a broken world, the resurrection stands as both the promise of cosmic renewal and the pathway to personal healing. Moreover, this victory invites an active participation. It is not a passive event confined to history. It calls for a living response. To accept the resurrection's power is to step into a new way of being, one marked by freedom, hope, and transformative grace. I feel compelled to see resurrection not just as an event to be celebrated annually but as a daily reality that demands courage to live authentically and boldly. This personal application is where the cosmic and the intimate fuse, fueling a faith that can withstand trials and embrace joy. Ultimately, the resurrection shatters every illusion of final defeat, revealing a world recreated by love and grace. It echoes across the cosmos and into the depths of our hearts, calling us to rise from the ashes of guilt, shame, and fear into a life marked by freedom and purpose. This is the radical, unstoppable power that continues to change everything, not just the universe but the very fabric of who we are. At the very core of Easter lies a love so relentless, so fierce, it defies human comprehension. The resurrection is not merely a distant miracle witnessed in history. It is the crescendo of a love story written across the ages. A divine narrative woven into the very fabric of existence. God's love did not stay distant or indifferent but moved with purposeful intent through the willing sacrifice of His Son. A love so profound that it embraced pain, betrayal, and death itself to reclaim what had been shattered. This love did not turn away when confronted by cruelty. It leaned into the darkest moments with unwavering commitment, demonstrating that true love is not measured by ease or comfort but by the willingness to endure for the sake of restoration. This love breaks every barrier, reaching out to the broken, the lost, and the weary without demanding perfection. It does not wait for us to earn its favor. Instead, it calls to the depths of every heart, whispering the possibility of healing and renewal. I find this truth profoundly liberating. In a world obsessed with worthiness and achievement, Easter's love reminds us that we are accepted not because of what we've done but because of what has been done for us. It invites us into a restoration that is as radical as it is tender. A restoration that breathes hope into places long thought dead and invites new life where despair had taken root. The story of Easter is, therefore, not simply about resurrection in the physical sense but about love's power to transform the human condition from within. It reveals a God who chooses to be intimately involved with the pain and brokenness of the world, not as a distant observer but as a participant who bears our burdens. This love shocks me every time I reflect on it. It is relentless in pursuit, patient in presence, and radical in sacrifice. It tears down walls of separation, inviting us not only to receive this love but to become vessels of it ourselves. What strikes me most is that this love does not leave us where it found us. It compels a response, an awakening to live differently, to extend grace where there was judgment, to offer hope where there was despair. The resurrection is the ultimate proof that love is stronger than death, stronger than betrayal, stronger than every force that seeks to divide and destroy. This love pulses at the heart of Easter, making it not just a celebration of life beyond death but a living, breathing invitation to participate in a love that never quits. In a culture quick to reject love when it demands sacrifice or vulnerability, Easter's love stands as a bold counterpoint, an unstoppable force that refuses to let go. It is love that chooses to suffer for the sake of the beloved, love that conquers even the grave. This is the love that calls us by name, meets us in our brokenness, and invites us into a new story of hope and restoration. To grasp this is to understand Easter not only as an event in history but as the heartbeat of a love that continues to change everything, reshaping hearts, communities, and ultimately, the world. Easter's power is not a reward for effort or a prize for perfection. It is a gift, unearned, unmerited, and freely given to all who dare to believe. Salvation, at its core, is an act of grace, a divine generosity that shatters the myth that we must earn our way to redemption. The resurrection stands as the ultimate affirmation that Jesus' victory over death and sin is not exclusive or limited. It is abundant, overflowing, and sufficient for every soul, regardless of the shadows that may linger from their past. This truth challenges the harsh narratives we often carry about worthiness and failure. It reminds us that no mistake, no failure, no stain is too great to separate us from the life-giving power of the resurrection. Confessing Jesus as Lord and embracing belief in His resurrection is not merely an intellectual assent or religious ritual. It is the radical turning point where life can be irrevocably transformed. It marks the moment where the cold grip of death loosens, giving way to vibrant life. It is the passage from condemnation to forgiveness, a shift so profound that it overturns the entire trajectory of a person's existence. This transition is not theoretical or distant. It is deeply personal and immediate. I find this reality both humbling and electrifying. To move from fear to hope, from despair to joy, is not a gradual drift but a decisive step fueled by faith. It is a moment of surrender that simultaneously ignites courage and renewal. The power of salvation by grace through faith is a narrative of liberation. It frees us from the exhausting treadmill of self-justification and performance, inviting us instead into a rest found in acceptance. This rest is not passive but active, a vibrant, ongoing experience of living in the freedom of forgiveness and grace. I have witnessed how this liberation reshapes lives, breaking chains of guilt and shame that had long imprisoned the spirit. It empowers people to live authentically and boldly, anchored not in their own strength but in the unshakable foundation of grace. Yet, this gift demands a response. Faith is not passive reception but an active trust, a daily choice to live in the light of the resurrection's power. It calls for a surrender of old fears and a boldness to embrace new life. For me, this is where the drama of Easter plays out in real life, not in distant stories but in the raw, messy struggles of everyday existence. Faith is the lifeline that pulls us from the depths of despair and sets us on a path marked by hope, purpose, and transformation. Salvation by grace through faith is also profoundly inclusive. It extends an open invitation to all, no exceptions, no barriers. It is a universal embrace that defies the divisiveness of our world, proclaiming that every heart, every story, every brokenness can find wholeness in the resurrection. This inclusivity is revolutionary, shaking the foundations of judgment and exclusivity. It calls us to a humility that recognizes we are all recipients of the same undeserved grace. In embracing this truth, I am compelled to reflect on the freedom and responsibility it brings. The resurrection's power is not just to save but to change, to remake us into reflections of that grace we have received. It is a call to live as people transformed by a love that conquers death, a faith that breathes life, and a grace that knows no bounds. This is the heart of Easter's enduring power, a power that continues to break chains and rewrite stories, inviting us all into the miraculous reality of salvation freely given and boldly received. The story of Easter does not conclude with the empty tomb. It pulses forward, alive and unstoppable, in the transformed lives of believers scattered across the globe. This resurrection power is not a distant relic of ancient history but a living, breathing force that courses through those who embrace its reality. It compels ordinary people to love fiercely, forgive freely, and serve selflessly, becoming beacons of light piercing through the darkest corners of human existence. To witness this power in action is to see death defeated daily, not only in a spiritual sense but in tangible acts of grace that heal wounds too deep for words. What captivates me most about living resurrection power is its radical ability to break chains of addiction, bitterness, fear, and despair that so often imprison souls. It is a power that refuses to accept the status quo of brokenness, instead ushering in freedom where captivity once reigned. I have seen how this power mends relationships shattered by betrayal and pain, weaving broken hearts back together with threads of compassion and understanding. It is the balm for communities torn apart by division and strife, offering renewal and hope where despair seemed permanent. This is resurrection not just as a theological concept but as a revolutionary movement of restoration in the here and now. Living in resurrection power demands courage. It asks us to step out of comfort zones and into the unknown. To choose love over resentment, forgiveness over grudges, and service over selfishness. This is not easy. It is a daily battle against the forces that seek to dull our light and harden our hearts. Yet, the resurrection power equips and sustains us, infusing our actions with a divine energy that transcends human limitations. For me, this is the most thrilling aspect of Easter, the realization that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead dwells within believers today, empowering ordinary lives to become extraordinary testimonies of hope. This power also transforms our perspective on suffering and struggle. Instead of viewing hardships as meaningless or purely destructive, resurrection power invites us to see them as opportunities for growth, endurance, and deeper faith. It redefines pain as a crucible in which character is forged and hope is refined. Personally, this has reshaped how I face challenges, not with despair, but with a fierce expectancy that renewal and victory are always within reach. This mindset shift alone is revolutionary, turning fear into boldness and weakness into strength. Communities touched by resurrection power become living churches, not just buildings but vibrant networks of care, healing, and justice. They embody the gospel by reaching out to the marginalized, feeding the hungry, comforting the brokenhearted, and championing the powerless. This power moves beyond words into action, making faith visible and tangible in ways that change lives and societies. It confronts injustice and brings light to darkness, reflecting the very heart of the resurrection itself. In embracing this power, I am reminded that Easter is not a once-a-year event but a daily invitation to live resurrected. It calls us to embody the love, grace, and hope birthed from the empty tomb in every moment of our lives. This is the revolution that changes everything, not just history's narrative but the present reality of a broken world desperate for healing and light. Living resurrection power is the heartbeat of true transformation, the unstoppable force that continues to rewrite stories and renew souls, inviting each of us to participate in a life that conquers death and embraces eternal hope. The resurrection did more than roll away a stone. It shattered the very dominion of sin and evil, ripping apart the chains that once held humanity captive. What appeared to be a crushing defeat on the cross was, in reality, the ultimate triumph, a decisive victory so profound that it reverberates through every corner of existence. This victory did not come with trumpets or fanfare but through the silent power of resurrection, breaking the strongholds that had bound the world in darkness. The cross, once seen as a symbol of suffering and loss, became the battlefield where evil was decisively conquered. I am constantly amazed by how this truth flips our understanding of power and weakness, showing us that true victory often comes through sacrifice and apparent surrender. Yet, even though the enemy still prowls like a lion seeking to devour, his power is irrevocably broken. He no longer holds the ultimate authority. His days of ruling fear and despair are numbered. This shattered dominion means that believers are no longer victims but warriors called to stand firm in the freedom won on Easter morning. This call is not passive but active, a summons to live boldly, resisting evil with the power of resurrection alive within. For me, this tension between the present reality of evil and the assured victory of Christ creates a dramatic battleground where faith must be courageous and unyielding. It forces us to confront darkness not with timidity but with the fierce confidence that comes from knowing the war has already been won. Living in this ongoing victory means embracing a lifestyle of resistance against evil's subtle schemes. It means recognizing that the battle is not over yet but that the outcome is guaranteed. This assurance transforms how believers engage with the world. It empowers them to walk in freedom, speak truth, and act justly without fear. I have witnessed how this mindset changes lives, turning once fearful individuals into bold ambassadors of light, The resurrection power fuels a fearless confrontation of evil, dismantling lies, injustice, and oppression wherever they arise. What I find particularly striking is how this victory over evil is not abstract or distant. It is deeply personal and communal. Each believer becomes a participant in this cosmic triumph, called to embody the victory in daily life. It is the courage to forgive when hatred beckons, to choose peace amid conflict, and to shine hope into the darkest places. This is the heartbeat of resurrection power, a living force that transforms ordinary moments into acts of defiance against darkness. It challenges us to live as people who have been redeemed from fear, hatred, and despair, boldly carrying the banner of victory into every battle. The ongoing victory over evil also invites humility. Though we fight with resurrection power, we do so knowing that victory belongs ultimately to Christ. This truth guards us from arrogance and fosters a dependence on grace. For me, this balance between boldness and humility is vital. It keeps faith alive and active without becoming prideful or complacent. It reminds us that the fight against evil is continuous but never futile. In embracing this victory, believers participate in a grand cosmic drama where light triumphs over darkness, love over hate, and life over death. The resurrection is the opening chapter of this ongoing story, a story that calls us to stand firm, live boldly, and press on with unwavering hope. This is not merely a historical event but a present reality that empowers, sustains, and conquers. It is the ultimate victory that continues to break chains, shatter darkness, and usher in the unstoppable kingdom of light. Easter is not a distant memory confined to the pages of history. It is a living, breathing invitation to rise. It beckons us from the deepest tombs of fear, shame, and despair that imprison our souls and calls us into the radiant light of new life. This is no passive remembrance. It is a summons to awaken, to stand tall, and to step boldly into the freedom won on that resurrection morning. The grave may have seemed final, but Easter shatters finality itself. It invites each of us to break free from the chains that bind us, to shake off the darkness that tries to claim our hearts, and to embrace a life overflowing with hope, love, and purpose. This call to rise is the very heartbeat of Easter, an unstoppable truth that life conquers death, love conquers hate, and hope conquers despair. It is the core message that pulses beneath every celebration, every tradition, and every whispered prayer on this sacred day. The resurrection is not a story locked in the past. It is a dynamic, powerful reality that continues to transform lives, ignite courage, and inspire change. When we accept this invitation, we step into a new narrative, one where brokenness is healed, fear is replaced by faith, and despair gives way to unshakable hope. I have seen the power of this invitation change lives in the most remarkable ways. People once overwhelmed by guilt find forgiveness. Those crushed by shame discover dignity. Hearts burdened by fear learn to soar. This is resurrection power in action. A force so fierce it breaks through the darkest nights and lights the way toward a future filled with promise. But embracing this call requires courage. It asks us to leave behind the familiar tombs of comfort, control, and complacency, and to walk into a life of radical freedom and relentless hope. This is not always easy, but it is necessary. The invitation to rise challenges us to live authentically and boldly, knowing that we do so under the banner of a victory that changed everything. So today, I urge you to answer this call. Rise from whatever holds you captive, be it fear, bitterness, regret, or doubt. Step into the light of the resurrection and allow its power to renew your spirit and transform your life. Don't let the tombs of your past define your future. Instead, become a living testimony of Easter's enduring victory. Share this hope with others. Be a beacon of love in a world desperately searching for light. Let your life proclaim that death does not have the final word, and that the power of resurrection is alive and at work within you. In embracing the risen Christ, we become part of a story far greater than ourselves, a story of redemption, renewal, and unstoppable hope. This is the invitation to rise, to live fully, and to carry forward the resurrection's power every single day. The choice is yours. Will you remain in the shadows of the tomb? Or will you step into the light and live as a witness to the victory that changed everything? Rise up, live boldly, be transformed, because Easter is not just a moment in time. It is the eternal call to new life. And it is calling you right now.